Let's take a look at tiling a texture now. So we've got our texture into our shader, which generates our material, and we have the end product uh, with our level here that is set up. What if we wanted to make this dirt texture bigger or smaller? So, for instance, what if that dirt was on the ground? And we wanted to size it up and down. Now it looks like this has already got a tiled UV set on it already, so it's not stretched out too big. It's already got some tiling to it. We're going to set that up now. So you've got the texture map coming in, and these are the UVs. So these are the UVs you set up in Max effectively. So each point, each vertex in the UVs, UV vertex, has got a position on a good old Cartesian graph. And that Cartesian graph allows you to be able to then control, we could mess with that Cartesian graph in a sense. We could take those UV verts that came out of Max and we could start playing around with those and doing crazy things to them. It's amazing what you can do with it. So another way to add a node, by the way, is click and drag out. We're going to type in texture, and we're looking for texture coordinate here. Okay, so we're going to add that. So nothing will change right now. By default, Unreal is using the texture coordinates coming out of the whatever asset this material has been applied to. So in this case, this sphere that we're sort of looking at. But we're going to need this because we want to manipulate these texture coordinates before they get to the texture sample. So we're going to scale them up and down and make them bigger or smaller. Next thing we're going to need is a multiply node. So we're going to multiply the position of all the UV verts up and down to basically shrink and grow them. Now to get to the multiply node, you can right click, type in multiply, and you'll see multiply here. You could find them over in the right hand pane, or again, it is M. So we're just going to hold down M and left click. So with the multiply node in there, we can plug the text coordinates into A, the output into the UV channel. Now, nothing again is going to change because if you look at the multiply node, we have constant A coming in, which is now the UV coordinates, which is a UV channel. It's two channels, right? U and V here. You can see we could have actually scaled them right here, but you'll see why I'm going down this road in a second. With the multiply node now, we're multiplying by a single scalar value, just a 1.0. So what it does is it converts that UV and essentially is multiplying U and V by a value of 1. Okay, so we're going to scale both U and V here. So if I change this to 4, for instance, in the multiply node, you'll see it all gets smaller. I'm just going to leave it back at a value of 1. We don't want to just do that here, and you're going to find out why as we move forward with our materials and how to build out proper reusable materials. I'm going to add a constant again, and that's holding down 1 on the keyboard. Right, this is this constant right here with 1. I'm going to plug that in. And of course, I plug that in, you're going to go, oh my God, it didn't work. Where'd my texture go? Well, you're multiplying the UV coordinates by 0. Any number multiplied by 0 is 0. You just took all your UV coordinates and bashed them down into the corner of the UV space, okay? So back at a value of 1, you'll get your default again, and we'll be able to control this number up and down to be able to scale our UVs as we like. Now, maybe we want to do a U and V separately. So I'm just going to do this another way by pulling out, and I'm going to find an append node. We just want append vector. And a vector is an XYZ value or a UVW or RGB essentially. So we're going to be building this out as a U and V channel. I'm going to take the output of that and plug it in, and you're going to see it says error, and it's because we need another input. So I'm going to plug that one in. And now we're multiplying this texture coordinates by 1 in the U and 0 in the V. So we get the streaky setup. I'm going to set that back to 1. We should get back to our default again. So now if I control these two values, I can scale the UVs in one axis and not the other. So I'll set this one to 4, and you'll see now I've basically start to stretch them or compress them one way, and it looks like they're stretched. Really, it's one top to bottom, and now four around the sphere. Okay. So once you've got these, what we want to actually start doing is making what is called material instances. And here's why. We don't want to do what I just showed you in the previous video, and that's applying this material directly to the objects in the scene. Okay, we're going to do this a different way. We're going to use something called material instances, and that's what this folder is going to be for. And you're going to see why in 1 second. So I'm going to take these two inputs that we have here. I'm going to right click on these and convert to parameter at the top of the list. Now, as a parameter now, I can actually go about naming them. So I'm going to say, um, tile, whoops, I don't have it highlighted, tile U, and I want to call this one tile V. And you can set defaults to them. So the default value is going to be 1, which is what we want. And it took the default of the constant that we put in there that was already set to. But I'd make sure those at 1 so that it's scaled 1 to 1 in the U and the V to begin with. And now with these have been exposed essentially to material instances. Let's go ahead and save and apply. So I'm going to make sure I apply this. And there it is. Nothing's changed. It's still scaled the same way because we're scaling a 1-to-1 here. And you can see that we have the material. I'm just going to do a save real fast, make sure everything's saved. And now we might want different scaling in each and every one of these 4 objects. Well, right now, if I go in and change the scaling here, I change it on all of them. So again, in Max or something, there's ways around it again in Max, in Maya, whatnot, but you could say, well, I'm going to make 4 materials. Well, that's a bad idea. You've just replicated each material. They're all exactly the same dirt, and you've just had to replicate the same material 4 times. And now you want to make a change to your material. You got to change it in 4 different places. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a material instance. So I'm going to take the material that we have here that we've applied to all of the objects. And I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say create material instance. We don't want inst on the end. Check the naming conventions. You will change yours, and it's MI underscored to prefix for the material instance. And our material instance should reside in the material instance folder. So I'm going to say move here. And for sake of argument, I'm going to start with a box. I'm just going to remove the dirt off of here, and I can just hit this reset. And maybe we'll take it off this one as well. So you'll see it happen on 2. So here's the difference now. So I'm going to go back to the material instances now. So instead of applying the material, I'm going to apply the material instance to these 2. I'm going to drag and drop these on, the same one on both. And I'm going to open the material instance. So here's the material. Here's the material instance. You can see it looks completely different now. It looks like the lighting, I'm just going to orbit around. You'll be able to see the lighting better when it's on the lit side. I'll just drag this over to the side here so you can see it. Now, if you remember over in the material itself, to be able to make a change to anything, we had to make the change, then we had to apply it, and then we had to wait for the shader to compile and it would update. Okay, watch what happens now with material instance. We exposed the tile U and tile V. So we exposed these 2 here to the material instance. And that's what's showing up right here. So when I go over here, I can turn them on now so that I want to make changes to them. And watch what happens as I change them. I can make the changes now in real time right in the viewport and watch the result happen right there. Whereas if I made changes to this one, I'd have to wait. Here's the other part about this. I could take this material instance and duplicate it or make another material instance, for instance. And I'm going to call this, maybe dirt underscore 02. And now I've got a material instance for 02. I'm going to apply that to the ground. And the same thing, I can open that material instance and I've got an O2 here, and I can change that material instance separately from changing the material instance on the other objects. All of your materials should be material instances. There's another advantage to that, and that's memory and compiling. So when your game loads, it has to compile these and apply these materials and whatnot, make changes to them. The more materials you have, the more of these unique material flows. Basically, this has got to get remembered by the game and whatnot, and more of these materials that have been compiled in it has got to be there. It's going to slow things down. It's actually possible probably to make your entire game level out of about 3 or 4 materials, believe it or not. As long as we start understanding how to make more and more complex materials and exposing more parameters to them, we'll be able to make material instances that have a lot of control over them. Instead of just making a dirt material, why don't we just have a sort of solid, material that is we can use for anything. We could make it wood. We could make it whatever we want. So as we move forward, we'll start taking a look at the types of materials we want to create. You should only have really a handful of materials in here. Now, my game level that I've got going there has got a pile because I've been using it as a test bed and making a mess with students for a couple of years with that project now. But I could actually reduce it down to probably 4 or 5 materials at the most at this point now, and then lots of material instances. So we're going to get there as we move forward.